Good morning and welcome back to Barkaways. Some weeks are just better than others. I mean, this week we've actually got 4 of the big 5 supercars in. So we've got obviously the Enzo, the F50, the F40 and the 288 GTO, all in for work. So I thought I'd just go around the cars and talk about them and what they're in for and what we're doing to them. So this one's just come in. This just coming from Italy. It's actually going to the concourse. So it's certainly going to be a standout car in yellow. It'll certainly be a showstopper. But yeah, fantastic cars. As I said before, all of these F cars were the absolute best they could be at their time, whether it was the 80s, 90s, 2000s. These were the top cars. All these cars were developed by Ferrari with the latest technology, and there was usually a F1 driver involved that helped them develop the car. So they were all the absolute pinnacle of what Ferrari could produce, and they are fantastic cars. And you do have to pinch yourself sometimes that there's not many people. I was out in the F50 the other day. There's not many people in the world that get to drive these cars, and you can't take that for granted. So let's have a look around them and see what we've been doing to them. Okay, so the F40, spoken about these so many times, the whole world knows about an F40. I was talking to a client the other day, he took his to an event, he said there was people all around the car all day. It's one of the most iconic cars ever made. Work-wise, so practicality-wise, we've just put a clutch in this and serviced it, so no, it's just mechanical work. The difference between the cars, obviously we've just looked at the Enzo, that's a sort of carbon tub car, so you've got the carbon tub of the car and everything is bolted to the tub, so the engine's bolted to the back, the suspension's bolted to the corners. It's quite a rigid, it's a noisy sort of rattly thing. But power-wise, because they're naturally aspirated, the same as the F50 is a carbon tub car with everything bolted to it, but with a naturally aspirated engine, it's far more of a sort of linear curve that works on the rev range, whereas the turbo era, which we're here with the 288 and the F40, is a bit more whiz-bang. It's like, everyone's spoken about them, they will bite you, they will have you. As it starts to move, suddenly this big surge of power arrives and either spins you around or launches you into the future. So they're a fantastic thing, but it's a very, very different drive to the other cars, but certainly one of the most iconic. From a mechanical point of view, getting parts for them, talking to someone the other day, his indicator switch broke and you just can't get those anymore, so that had to be repaired. Fuse boxes, again, same as 288's Tesseros's. This is sort of the 80s stuff, so they're starting to sort of break down now. Clutches aren't too bad, you can get those. Obviously, there's a lot to do getting all the turbos and everything out of the way, so they're quite labour intensive, but still one of the most iconic cars ever done. So as you can see now with the backup, there's a lot going on in the back of these. So the engine's quite far forward, it's sort of mid-engine car, so the engine is forward of the rear axle, and then the gearbox is in line, so it's out the back. So it's not too bad to get the gearbox out, but there's a lot of stuff in the way. You've got exhaust, you've got turbos, you've got intercoolers. There's a lot of stuff to get out of the way just to get the gearbox out. So the F40 is one of the cars that runs a multi-plate clutch. So what that basically means is you've got more surface area. So it comes as like a sort of cassette type setup that you've got. Most cars just have one plate, which gives you 2 friction surfaces. So if you have 2 plates, you have 4 friction surfaces, so you've got twice the grip. And the sort of power these things are putting out, with a single plate clutch, you'd be burning it every 5 minutes. So putting a double plate clutch in with 4 surfaces basically doubles the length of the clutch. So that's why they're a sort of cassette type thing that comes with all the bits. Something that crops up on these that tends to happen on the hydraulic clutch cars more than the cable adjusted cars. Late boxers with a hydraulic clutch, 288 GTOs and F40s seem to do it. When you start it up from cold, you get this awful squeaky noise and you think, crikey, that sounds awful. You put your foot on the clutch and it goes straight away. What that is where the release bearing is fixed on the bell housing and only the middle bit turns, but this is all stationary, but the cover is all doing 1,000, 1,500 revs, so this is whizzing round and this is stationary, and where they touch it wears the steel fingers, and when they're just touching on and off and on and off, and what you can do, you grease them when you put a new clutch in, but after a while that wears off, and especially when cars have been standing and you get a bit of rust or something on these, you get this awful squeaky noise. Once you press the clutch, it pushes them together and it's fine. So just a little tip there, that when you do start your F40 up, it makes an awful noise. Don't panic, it's just a release bearing. Put your foot on the clutch and it's fine. Okay, so on to the F50 then. So the story of this one, it came into us for a check over. We looked at the car and it seemed to have all sorts of faults with it, and the more we got into it, the more we looked and found that someone else had already had a go at it, and I think they'd sort of almost given up. So the car had some warning lights on the dashboard. We had slowdowns 1 to 6, and only half the dashboard lit up, and there was an indicator fault. So we did try and drive the car, but it just ran terribly. It was awful. So we put the diagnostics on, and it had 3 faults in the diagnostic for flywheel sensors and engine sensors and what have you. So the more we dug into this, because we've done a lot of head scratching on this, the faults with the engine's run by the management, the computer, so there's 2 ECUs that run this. So the engine's run by the engine ECUs, and the dashboard is a means of displaying faults. So what you should think is the engine ECUs have a fault, they tell the dashboard, and the dashboard says you've got a fault with this or that. So we had consistent faults on the engine. Every time we cleared them, they came straight back. Now that's usually due to if there's an actual fault with a sensor. If it just gets a glitch now and again, or if it has just picks up a wonky signal, it'll clear down and it'll go, and it may come back in a week, 6 months, or whatever. If it comes back straight away, you know there's some sort of open fault with that sensor. It's come straight back on. Now, there was only, when we individually looked at the sensors, there was only one sensor, there was one coolant sensor that was open circuit, the rest were reading fine. So you start to think, okay, so we're going around earths and what have you. And without giving all our secrets away, we managed to get to the bottom of that one, which was, once we got to it, like everything, once you know and found it, it's quite an easy fix, but it did take some finding. So then we went onto the dashboard. So if we come down the front, we're pretty sure we've sort of fixed the engine end of it now. We've got the engine running better, but we've still got indicated faults on the dashboard where we don't seem to have faults with the engine. So then you look at it, and one of the faults that came up was the inertia switch. Now, inertia switch is a little switch that's down here. And if you imagine like a ball bearing in a cup, it's a safety device. Most cars of this era have got them. If you have an accident, it's like a ball bearing in a cup. The ball bearing on a G switch goes up, hits the switch and turns the fuel pumps off. So if you do have an accident or any rollover situation, rather than the car sitting there pouring fuel everywhere, it cuts the pumps off. Now, the dash was thinking that the inertia switch was on, but the car was running, and clearly it couldn't, because if it thought it was on, it should have cut the pumps, but it didn't. And there was also, we had some high beam, low beam lights coming on and things like that. So there was still some quirky stuff going on with the dashboard. Now, these are the backlit dashboards. They do suffer on the F50s because, as I've said earlier, these are carbon tubs, so these are all rock hard. Everything in here is solid plastic tub. And when they first came out, they did suffer with vibrations, that the things were shaking quite a lot and causing problems with the dashboards. So they light up, they're backlit. There's like a fluorescent tube in the back that lights all the gauges up. And they're all electronic gauges. They go a nice greeny colour. So we could only see half of that. So dash went away. What happened was they've got little batteries inside the dashboard that just keep the thing live, the memories for the mileage and things like that. And obviously these cars are 20, 25, 30 years old now. So the batteries leak, and the acid in the battery gets into the circuit board, corrodes the circuit board, and whichever little circuit or little transistor or resistor that it get to, it causes corrosion, and then that then causes a problem with the instrumentation and lights coming on. So that was what transpired, that the dash was making up its own faults basically. So now we're starting to get somewhere, so hopefully we should be just about there, but it has been a lot of voltmeters and a lot of ohms resistance testing and sanity checking, because sometimes you can get buried in these things that think they're so overcomplicated, but actually when you break it down into circuits and go around with your voltmeter and do it circuit by circuit, you can sort of sort these things out. So talking about dashboards, they are literally just like fluorescent light tubes. So when the dash was running, you could only see half the dashboard because half of it was lit up and half of it was dark. So they are literally just fluorescent tubes, and one of them had gone down. And these are the little batteries, and you can see that's just like old batteries. If you leave an old battery lying around for years, most of them leak, because they do. We've all had the Christmas toys and all the rest of it. So you know, a 25-year-old Ferrari is no different. It's got a little battery here, and the acid's leaked out, and you can see all the corrosion on the end. But what it does cause is absolute havoc for the other delicate little circuit boards and that are in the vicinity. Last but not least, the 288 GTO, the rarest of all of the cars. 272, maybe one more for Niki Lauda, but the jury's out on that one. But either way, there's only 270 odd of these. Brilliant. I mean, it's the car that started the journey of the F cars, the GTO. Brilliant, brilliant cars. I think they're the sort of really classy one. They're not as ferocious as the F40. They're much easier to live with. They're comfortable. You haven't got the bucket seats. No, they're just a real class act, spectacular cars. So this one came in, again, when you break it down to work-wise, what do we need to do to it? I always say to sanity check these cars, they're £1 and they need fixing. This one had been laid up for a long time, and the clutch didn't disengage at all. Sometimes what happens is when cars stand for a long time, the plates actually stick together, get a bit of moisture on them, and they rust together. So when you put your foot on the clutch, they don't actually disengage, so you can't select any gears. Now, the old school ones amongst you will know that sometimes you can get the things started on the starter motor, drive them round with your foot on the clutch, and they do disengage. Now, this one didn't, because there's only so much sort of jerking, you don't want to damage anything. So we took the whole gearbox out, took the clutch out, and sure enough, it was all stuck together. So that's now sorted. We've got to do a few more bits and pieces to this one, and then this will be good to go out. But I just thought I'd share with you, it's quite nice to have all of a selection of the big F cars here all at once. I know with the ridiculous values of these things, insurance companies worry, but no, to us, they're cars that need fixing. And we're slowly working our way through, but I thought I'd share some of the challenging problems that we have on these. By understanding how the cars work, you've got to know what good looks like. Before you can fix a fault, you've got to know what it's going to be when it's right. So clutches sticking, the F50 electrics, you're working your way through logically. Someone else had just put a whole load of sensors and plugs and all sorts on it. They hadn't actually gone through and found the problem. So it's understanding what it should be like and what correct is, and then working backwards from there. So, but I guess if it was easy, everyone would do it. Okay, here we are on the F50. We've got the dashboard back now, so the dash is back in. So we're going to road test the car. One of the things I do is change my shoes. The pedal boxes in these are quite small, and whilst we use the Skechers, I should get money out of Skechers. The amount of money I spend on Skechers shoes, but these are brilliant for workshop stuff, but they're not too good for driving, so we've got the small Puma ones. So we're about ready to go. Other pre-flight checks that we've done, obviously you just don't jump in these things and drive them down the road. So we've done the wheel nuts, we've done the tyre pressures, we've checked the coolant, we've done the oil, and we'll do it again when it's hot. This one, the dash is good with the suspension lights on because it hasn't had any wheel sensor speed yet, so we need to drive it so it picks up a wheel speed sensor, and hopefully that'll all go out. So pre-flight check's done, let's go. And already you can hear, I've spoken about these things before, they are quite noisy low down because everything's bolted to the tub. The new word seems to be visceral, so it is quite a sensation, but once you get these things moving, they do come into their own. Some of you noticed we've left the trimmed part of the dashboard top off at the moment, just in case we have to go back into anything, rather than risk taking it on and off and on and off. So at the moment it's one of our Saturday morning ones. We tend to go out in these sort of cars when the traffic's quiet. You all know we're close to a bypass, and we're still on lift. You just go out sort of middle of the day. And when it's quiet, you don't want too many people around you when you're out in these things. I know we joke about changing the shoes, but it does make a difference. The pedal box on this is bang on, and your feet can just slip between the pedals. It's brilliant, which I know the staff laugh at me, but if anyone's ever driven a Caterham 7, you know you can't do it in big shoes. So the suspension's gone down, so it automatically, the lift will drop we've said on Enzos and things before, it's got a speed sensor in it. So that's all gone down. Oil's good, temperatures are starting to come up. Suspension light's already gone off, which is good. It's just needed to sense some road speed. The gearbox is just you can just heel and toe it down through the box. I've said before, all these cars had F1 drivers involved with them, so they're all good cars. So on this one we had some engine problems as well, that the engine was causing some of its own problems through wiring and what have you in the engine bay, and then we also had a double problem that not only was the engine causing problems, that the dash was then displaying the problems, the dash was making its own problems and displaying problems that the engine didn't have. So this has been quite a head-scratching car, sorting out what was an indicator problem and what was an actual problem. So we managed to sort out the actual problems, and then we've sorted out the indicating problems, and now we've got a car with no warning lights. One of the ones on this that sort of was a weird one, they've got a G switch. So the inertia switch was saying that the engine was turned off, but the engine was running. And I spent a lot of time working with the dash people. I was over there this week again with them, finding little circuits and little tiny cracks in the circuit boards and things like that were just back for reading. Just coming down. What a great, to have a manual car, you forget how good these are. It's absolute perfection. You can just slot them through the box, the gears are exactly where you want them to be. So we've got all lights out, we're looking good. Fantastic. The sun is shining, and it is a privilege. How many people in the world are out in an F50 on a quiet road with the sun shining? No. I know I've been doing this for 40 years, but you never get bored of doing this job. The other thing we're doing is just getting some temperature into the brakes, so this car hasn't been driven an awful lot. Just love that gearbox. What a spectacular car these are. These are just so good. As I've said before, yes, they cost absolutely millions, but it is an absolute masterpiece. It's warm enough so we can check the hot oil levels, bleed off the cooling system again, and get it back to the customer. So then we're coming to the yard, so just press the lift button, get the lift up, just pull it back into the workshop, put the lift down. I'd already gone down, going down the yard, so we just put, you always leave them with the lift down. So there you have it, living and working with F cars. Yes, they're a challenge, yes, you really have to dig deep to get these things fixed, but when they work, they are just absolutely spectacular. Brilliant, brilliant cars. See you guys on the next one.